and Roy Jenkins were recruited by the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst Intelligence Department as agents for the EEC for Germany.
Were they paid agents?
I don't think they were paid. I think they did it because of misguided feelings of self-importance and grandeur.
I have to say at this point that these are the opinions of my guests and not necessarily the opinions of this show. Do you have any proof of this?
Well, if you look at the World Report's newsletter, they've done quite a lot of investigation into it. And it does completely explain why those three got on so well together and why they were so keen to push these treaties through. I mean, Geoffrey Rippon actually signed one of the treaties, well, the first one. And of course, Ted Heath orchestrated the whole thing. Why would you want to abolish your nation? Well, if you were Kim Philby or Burgess or Maclean, you would want to do that sort of thing. Well, actually, Ted Heath, Geoffrey Rippon, Roy Jenkins were very similar people.
Well, yes, but they worked for the Soviet Union, and what's left of the Soviet Union, Russia, is not part of the EU, is it? And they're not likely to become part of the EU, not in the short term anyway.
Well, that was the original plan in 1917. They were hoping to create one Soviet state right through Europe.
But instead, I mean, at the end of the Cold War, the Soviet Union itself broke up, didn't it? And all those places like Ukraine and Belarus and all those places became nominally independent.
Yes, it still is the agenda that those two bodies will get together, the Soviet Union and the European Soviet will get together as one. That always has been their plan.
And China?
No.
Not China?
Not part of the same grouping.
That's going to be some other...
Yes.
It's a bit George Orwell, isn't it?
Yes, George Orwell was a stunning prophet. He was amazingly accurate.
Okay, so let me just sort of drive down to the nub of this then. What you're saying is that effectively Britain no longer exists?
No, we still exist in the same way that Hungary or Czechoslovakia or Poland existed under the Soviet Union inside the Warsaw Pact. So we're not a nation as such on our own. Or if you want to look at the American side of things, you know, we are sort of as relevant as the state of Ohio is to the USA. I mean, it's not that, I mean, they have, European unions produce maps without the word England or Britain on it. They clearly don't want us to exist. But our constitution has been replaced by the 6 EU treaties. So the British constitution, which is written, that's the Frankfurt School subversion technique to get us all thinking the British Constitution isn't written, but it is written.
Well, ever since Magna Carta, you
exactly.
mean? That was written, wasn't it? And the Bill of Rights.
Exactly, 1689, the whole thing's written. But they've been telling us it's not written, so that we think, oh, well, we better let Gordon Brown introduce another one. But our Constitution is written.
But actually, the Constitution, they dropped that because everyone made a fuss. So they brought in the Lisbon Treaty, which was the Constitution. I believe I'm correct in saying that, largely.
Right, hang on, I'm talking about the British Constitution. So they dropped the EU's Constitution and incorporated it in the 6 treaties. A lot of it was already in the first 5 treaties. They just put the rest of it into Lisbon. So the EU Constitution is wholly contained in the 6 treaties that the Queen has signed. And the important thing to remember is that as far as they are concerned, the EU Constitution takes primacy over the British Constitution, which is their way of saying, actually, the British Constitution doesn't exist anymore, only the EU Constitution has existed since the 1st of January 2009.
So why are we having an election in May? Actually, no, go on. We're about to go to a break, but I'll let you quickly introduce that.
Because there are 62 million people in Britain who don't know what's going on, and only about 250,000, many of whom will be watchers of this programme, who do know what's going on. And they need to keep the 62 million fooled long enough until the EU has consolidated its power.
And then they say, well, we don't need a parliament anymore. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
So Westminster will become a hotel or something?
Probably knock it down and make a
regional council? Or...
No, I just think they'll make a hospital out of it.
A hospital?
Knock it down.
There's one the other side of the river. Anyway, we're going for a break now. If you'd like to text in your questions or comments for David Noakes, please do so now to 87778 with the word EDGE, and then your text. See you back here very soon. Welcome back to On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers, and my special guest, David Noakes. So, David, the most recent treaty, the final treaty, if you like, that we've signed that makes us part of Europe, apparently irrevocably, is the Lisbon Treaty.
Correct. Yeah.
What does that say?
Well, some really quite stunning things. For example, page 18, Article 9, defines the executive of the European Union, and that is a three-tier, unelected Politburo. That's exactly what you have in the Soviet Union, except that was only a one-tier unelected Politburo, but it's still now three unelected Politburos. Politicians choose our leaders, okay?
But aren't they elected, the politicians?
Well, no, none of the commissioners are elected, none of the council are elected. The top council is the Council of Prime Ministers. But of course it is the 27 prime ministers of the European Union who dragged us into the European Union in the first place. People like Gordon Brown are not only bilderbergers, but they are bought, paid and owned by the European Union. So...
But doesn't the fact that he's elected, firstly, into the Labour Party as a member of Parliament, and secondly, elected by the other members of Parliament or the other members of the Labour Party as their leader, doesn't that mean that there is a democratic process of sorts?
None whatsoever, no. Let me just give you an example of the power of the Bilderbergers.
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher was a Bilderberger. She had to be, or she couldn't be leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister. But she was a naive Bilderberger, and towards the end of her reign, she realised that the Bilderbergers were building the EU dictatorship, and she made her Bruges speech, and she switched side. She actually came onto our side. Within 2 months, she was out on the street, and a compliant Bilderberger, John Major, in her place. Now, that's 8 Bilderbergers on the Conservative Central Committee who threw her out. That's how much power they have. They decide who will be leader of the party, they decide who we can vote for, and we can only vote for one of them. And if someone looks popular, he'll be invited to join. If he won't join, he won't become Prime Minister. So who can be the next Prime Minister of this country? Well, Ed Balls can be, David Miliband can be. No one else can be, because they're not Bilderbergers.
But what if they looked popular and got invited?
Oh yeah, they can get invited. This is what happened to Herman van Rompuy of
the Dutch. No, he's Dutch or Belgium?
Belgium. He was the Belgian Prime Minister, and he's now president of the EU dictatorship. And he is what is kindly called a federalist, i.e. he believes heart and soul in the EU dictatorship, but he looks like a kindly pair of hands while the EU consolidates its power. He isn't a kindly pair of hands at all. And then they appointed this apparently English woman, Lady Catherine Ashton, who took the communist route up through government quangos and government agencies on huge salaries at our expense. And she was the bitch who forced the Lisbon Treaty.
We have to warn you about language here, David.
She pushed the Lisbon Treaty through the House of Lords. She is the traitor that pushed the Lisbon Treaty through the House of Lords, and she is now the EU's foreign minister. So they're a very nasty pair.
Okay, so the Lisbon Treaty.
Right. So it is an unelected Politburo. That is the leadership of the EU. Page 16, Article 8A4, political parties at the European level